Okay, so this video is not against anyone or meant to be directed specifically at anyone in regard to, like, I'm not speaking to them and I'm not actually showing their comment on here. But it is talking about something I interacted with today, and I felt like, I have been a little bit more relaxed, I guess you could say, on the issue of colorism. So I did not actually say it, but I want to say it here on my channel, so I figured why not? So I kind of find it annoying with people who believe in colorism, people who push colorism in this. And a lot of people know this is a big issue to me. That most of the problems that they talk about may exist, but they only force it to be an issue of dark skin. So they basically tell everyone else who's black that they can't experience hardship for being black, discrimination for being black, racism for being black, because they have dark skin and someone discriminated against them because, in truth, it was because they were black. But they keep saying that it's because they're dark skinned. It's safe to say it's not because they're dark skinned, because there are plenty of people who are not dark skinned who experience the same thing. See, if you have traits that are strongly identified as black, it doesn't matter what your skin tone is, people will see that you have a phenotype like black people and therefore treat you accordingly. And if they think negatively of black people, they will put that on you as well. So that's my main issue with them, is that they constantly try to silence black women, basically, because they only make it about them and they can't handle it being about a black woman's issue, because it's always like this one content creator used to say. I know she seems to be gone now, but she would talk about the fact that it's like oppression Olympics, basically, like who basically had the worst experience. And it's like, to me, I don't think that dark-skinned black people have worse experiences than other black people. The reason I don't is because I've seen it plenty of times where I was treated worse than people who were dark-skinned. And it was obviously based off of race. But someone would actually hide it easier, in my case, by treating another dark-skinned black person better, so then they could actually disguise the fact that they were racist towards me. And people could do that often. They might use one black person to show, hey, see, I'm not racist, but then treat another black person in a racist way. And it's not like, people always say, okay, that means that they're going to be more accepting towards someone who is brown, period, or someone who is light-skinned, basically. Often people will try and say, like, the Zoe Saldanas of the world and things of that nature. The typical brown-skinned black girl is going to be more acceptable or whatever. But you have to understand, many of the time people don't make that distinction. So they might just choose one black person, and it doesn't matter that that black person is dark-skinned, to choose not to be racist to them for whatever reason. Maybe they relate to them in one regard or another, but then another black person they'll choose to be more racist towards. And that's just because, they chose to do that. So to me, that's why I kind of am like, with the whole idea of colorism, people who are black experience racism sometimes, and it's not on a basis of what your skin tone is. With this tone and this idea of colorism existing, it shuts out the idea of actually revealing racism for what it is, because you're saying that half the time black people aren't supposed to complain about racism because we're supposed to have it better than a dark-skinned black person. And it's like, okay, if that's the case, then you would be the only one experiencing these situations because you're dark-skinned. But half the time people talk about colorism, I can say that's happened to me too, and I'm not dark skinned. So it just makes no sense why people have to say colorism exists and that it's an issue among dark skinned black people that are treated worse than other complexions. I honestly think that people don't pay attention to the fact that the only sense of colorism is perpetuated by dark skinned people, it seems, like dark skinned black men and dark skinned black women. And I happened upon a different video for this. Somebody was trying to say that biracials come to black spaces to feel better about being biracial. And they were saying that white people taught them to feel better than black people, which was funny to me. That one was funny because like white people do not teach biracials to do that. If they have a racist view towards black people, usually they include it towards biracials. I've seen it myself, and I don't mean their parents. Usually, like people always say the parents are racist. I don't think their parents are racist. That's crazy ideas there. But I have seen situations where, for example, I worked with a girl who was biracial. She was a darker biracial, in my opinion. When I say darker, I mean like my hue, basically. Like for a biracial, I would be on the darker end. Even though I'm a caramel, my complexion's like the same as Halle Berry's. But I would consider Halle Berry more on the darker hue of biracials, because biracials tend to be lighter than black people. It's kind of obvious because they have more European ancestry. But I worked with a girl who had exactly my same complexion and a similar phenotype at that. But her hair was, I would say her hair was a little less curly. I think her hair might have been 3A minus 4A, so you get. But she talked about how she didn't know one half of her white family because they rejected her mother and in turn rejected her. Because she was with a black man and she had a child with a black man. So in those cases, I could say, yeah, you can say that someone can have racism in their family, but I don't think their parents are specifically racist. I do think this, though, that a lot of the time people think that biracials were taught by white people that they were better than black people in these situations. And it makes no sense to me because I think, honestly, they don't know or they don't experience life being the color of a paper bag, basically, or lighter. If you watch a video by Pop by Cherry, colorism video, she has a colorism video. And she talks about, and she's not biracial, by the way. She's a black woman who's light brown complected. She's lighter than a paper bag, basically, minimally. And you look at her video, she talks about how dark-skinned black men will talk to her about how she is better than a dark-skinned black woman because they assume she has mixture in her or that she's mixed. They perpetuate that idea that mixed race is better. And from personal experience, I will say that a lot of the time I've seen both dark-skinned black women and black men do this. But I have seen dark-skinned black men act like it more often and act like it's a better thing more openly and strongly than a black woman who's dark-skinned. But both will act that way. You can't expect a biracial. Now, for example, someone who's black and lighter skinned, it's different. Because one, when we're approached with situations like that, it's problematic because you were always taught you were black, yet you have black people coming to you, telling you that what you are is not that good, and the fact that you look like something else is a good thing. So it's a bad thing because it's an insult to who we actually are. Now think of it from a biracial person's perspective, though. You have a black person saying exactly what they are is better than what that black person who's talking is. Of course, you're going to create a narrative. Now, I don't understand why blame the biracial for this. Why not blame the person who did it, the dark skinned black man? But a lot of the time in these situations, I've said this before, many of the dark skinned black women who complain about these situations and complain about people like this, they don't go after the dark skinned black man because they love him. They want him. They desire him so deeply. They cannot go after the culprit. So they go after the individual who just was a product of what their dark skinned black counterpart created, basically, and basically treated those people and made them believe they were better, basically. And honestly, that whole aspect of trying to act like mixed is better than black does not just affect mixed people, it affects everyone. Okay, it even affects the very, very brown complected people. For example, I I can come up with a situation, and I've talked about him before. I hate this motherfucker. Okay, I hate him. Um, he was my supervisor at one of my jobs, and he was of the black people the lightest of the black people besides me, basically. But I thought he was dark skinned, and then I realized he was brown skinned. Okay, so in this situation, I had a quick, brief conversation. We did not talk a lot because we hated each other. I was so happy. The last day I worked there, I was so happy what I did to him. And I've said this before. I have no regrets. But anyway, um, we were talking about speaking Spanish. And I remember talking about something about it went to the topic of being Hispanic or something, and yeah, he kind of got to a point where he was kind of like bragging to an extent that people thought he looked Hispanic or Dominican, pretty much. And you will see this, even people as dark as him who are safely brown. Not light brown, but he was safely brown. Like he was like the color of a paper bag. Like, around that color. And basically, when people are like that, they have that mentality that the good side of their complexion, the good side of their phenotype is that they look like something else. They have a hierarchy idea of themselves compared to dark skinned black people. I'm just showing that even in those cases, you could see that those people would have that side to them. Where do you think he got that from? Do you think he got that from just white people telling him that? They probably didn't even recognize he was different from a dark skinned black person. It's dark skinned black people who would basically tell him that and treat him that way, even if it's mildly, even in that case. So to me, I mean, like, who is to blame in these situations? It's not brown skin, light skin, or biracial people. It's dark skinned people for not loving themselves.